The Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
So glad you're joining us. Our lives are the currency of this day. Our dear friend, Tab Fresca, who joined us on the last episode to run down some very, very succinct and important points in this case. A couple things you might want to review that he brought up were incredible in regards to Bernard Crowe and his testimony. He was covering himself up with some dates, a lot of things to look into. Do yourself a favor. Get on CLODrive.com. Get some of these things researched. Support them. Support Deb Silva. We're coming back with Tab Fresca because our dear friend, Mr. Casey Fields, is in the field at the moment. Mr. Tab Fresca, thank you for last week's appearance. May we welcome you back on, sir.
Yes, thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks again for coming back on. We hinted last time where we went incredibly long because I just really love what you've written. So, Twilighters, thanks for bearing with us. We're going to have a little shorter episode today and keep it succinct about the blood evidence and the facts therein, according to Mr. Tab Fresca. Tab, let's get started.
Okay, this was bullet number 7. One of the biggest mysteries concerning the murders at Cielo Drive is the blood evidence. Some have written that Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring were killed on the front porch and their bodies were later moved to the living room. Others have written that they were killed in the living room and their bodies were moved twice, first to the front porch and then back to the living room. In both cases, they say Manson moved the bodies. The blood evidence is a complicated subject. To do it full justice would take many hours, photos, diagrams, charts, and science projects. I will attempt to describe a condensed version of the subject. On 8/9/69, law enforcement officers began to investigate the murders at 10050 Cielo. Photographs were taken, fingerprints, dry blood samples, and property were collected into evidence, and the 5 victims were brought to the coroner's office. Granado, who was responsible for gathering the dry blood evidence, did not take dry blood samples from the pools of blood that the victims were lying in. Granado did not take blood samples from the victims' clothing or items touching the victims. Granado selectively gathered only a few dry blood samples from the porch, which had a lot of blood on it. Granado did not take any blood samples from one of the largest blood spots on the front porch. Granado did not take dry blood samples from spots mentioned in other law enforcement reports. Granado did gather and type 29 important dry blood samples, which can be divided into 3 sets of 9 samples and 1 set of 2 samples. Each of these 4 sets are associated with a different victim: Parent, Folger, Sebring, and Tate. None of the blood samples were from Frykowski. When the medical examiners at the coroner's office performed the autopsy, blood, urine, bile, and stomach contents were saved for testing. Separate forms were filled out requesting toxicology tests and wet ABO blood typing. Wet blood was also sent to Granado to help him match the victim's dry blood samples taken. Granado wrote an executive summary style blood report. For each of the victims, he listed the victim's name, the ABO blood type from the coroner's office, the ABO blood type from his testing, and the MN blood subtype from his testing. 3 of the victims, Parent, Frykowski, and Folger, had the same ABO blood type and the same MN blood subtype, which is B-MN. While Tate and Sebring had the same ABO type, they had different MN blood subtypes. Tate was O-M and Sebring O-MN. Granado type 2 samples of dry blood found in parents' car is B-MN, which was parents' blood type, and parent was in the car. But B-MN also matches Folger and Frykowski. Granado type 9 samples of dry blood that appeared to be part of a path of blood that began in the living room, continued through the hallway leading to the master bedroom, within the master bedroom, the door to the master bedroom leading to the pool area, the outside walkway near the pool, and to Folger's body. Granado only determined the ABO blood type and did not subtype these samples. These samples were type B. Detectives would assume it was Folger's blood, but it also matched parent and Frykowski. Granado type 9 samples of dry blood that was Tate's type of O-M. O-M blood was found on the front porch, the front door, in the foyer, and on rope and 2 towels in the living room. Neither of the towels was found on Sebring's head. Granado type 9 samples of dry blood that was Sebring's type of O-MN. O-MN blood was found on the inside of the property button for the electric motorized metal front gate, on the scarf found on the front lawn, on the front walk, on the front porch, on the front door, on a piece of gun grip in the living room, and on 2 Foot Locker style shipping trunks located in the living room near the doorway that led to the foyer. When the detectives were writing the first progress report concerning this crime, they used Granado's blood report. The detectives proposed a theory that, number 1, parent was killed either first or last. Number 2, Tate, Sebring, and Frykowski met the killers on the front porch. Number 3, Tate and Sebring was stabbed on the front porch. Number 4, Frykowski tried to flee and was shot and subsequently stabbed to death on the lawn. Number 5, Tate and Sebring were brought into the living room and tied with rope. Number 6, Folger, who was in her bedroom, was stabbed multiple times as she tried to flee the house and would die on the lawn. Number 7, Tate and Sebring was stabbed to death in the living room. Number 8, blood appeared to be rubbed over Tate's body. Number 9, Tate's body may have been moved. When Atkins was first interviewed by her lawyers and subsequently testified at the grand jury, the real mystery began. Atkins said that parent, who was in his car, was killed first when Watson shot him 4 times. Atkins said that the remaining victims were brought into the living room and Watson shot and then stabbed Sebring. Sebring never left the living room. Atkins said that Frykowski got loose from her and Watson came to help. Watson cut and stabbed Frykowski and hammered Frykowski's head with his revolver. Frykowski was bleeding and went out the front door, and that is why the front porch has a lot of blood on it. Watson followed Frykowski outside. Atkins called Watson to help Krenwinkel, who was fighting with Folger. Watson stabbed Folger once in the stomach, and then Watson went out front to finish off Frykowski. Atkins said that she was on the floor during this time and Tate got loose. Atkins put Tate in a neck hold and brought Tate to the couch. Watson and Krenwinkel returned to the living room. Atkins held Tate's arms as Watson stabbed Tate in the heart. Watson told Atkins and Krenwinkel to go out front, and he continued to stab Tate. When Watson met Atkins and Krenwinkel outside, he told Atkins to go back inside and write something in blood. When Atkins went back inside, she noticed that Tate was stabbed more times than when she previously was in the house. Atkins took a towel and dipped it in Tate's blood. Atkins then wrote "pig" on the front door using the towel and threw the towel into the living room. Atkins said that as they left the property, Watson used his arm instead of his fingers to push the inside the property button for the electric motorized metal front gate. So Atkins believes that Frykowski's blood should be on the front porch and that Sebring's blood should not be. There are two scenarios that this could happen due to a single error for each scenario. First, if Frykowski really was type O-MN and the coroner's office switched his blood sample with someone else who had type B-MN, then all of the blood said to be Sebring's could be Frykowski's blood. So this matches Atkins' story. Second, if the coroner's office correctly identified or delivered Frykowski's blood as type B-MN, Granato could have gotten incorrect test results for all of the disputed Sebring-Frykowski samples if he used two of the same test solution instead of one type A solution and one type B solution. This could be due either to a labeling error or due to sloppiness. This would mean that Frykowski's B-M dry blood samples would instead return an incorrect blood type of O-MN, which was Sebring's blood type. Tate's samples would still show O-M. Now, this would presume that the other blood samples that were determined to be for Parent and Folger were tested correctly using one type A solution and one type B solution. Note that the blood testing took place over many weeks. Were all of Frykowski's blood samples missed by Granato? Were all of Sebring's dry blood samples transferred without Sebring leaving the living room? 5 of the O-MN blood samples could have been transferred by Watson. Watson stabbed Sebring and likely got some of Sebring's blood on his clothes. While fighting with Frykowski, Watson could have come in contact with the two trunks, or blood could have dripped from him onto the two trunks. Watson hammered Frykowski's head with his revolver and the gun grip broke. One of the 3 pieces of the gun grip had blood on it. There was a small amount of blood spatter on the front door that had been transferred by Watson as he was chasing or fighting with Frykowski. When the killers left the property, Watson used his arm to press the inside property button for the electric motorized metal front gate. The bloody scarf could have been carried to the front lawn by one of the killers, or even a dog. 2 spots on the front porch and 1 on the front walk contain a decent amount of blood and would not have been transferred by these means or normal means. So it's unlikely that Sebring's blood was transferred to these locations. However, if the scarf was used by the killers to do something witchy, they could have used the scarf to create these spots, but it would have taken multiple trips to transfer the blood unless a container was used to carry the blood out front. There are a few scenarios that can explain why Tate's blood type of OM was found on the front porch. Skeptics will be happy to hear that one scenario places Tate on the front porch very briefly, but not when the killers first arrive. Granato type 9 samples of dry blood that was Tate's type of O-M. Much of this blood can be attributed to transfer. Atkins was responsible for at least 3 of these transfers. The bare footprint on the front porch,
From Susan,
the word pig on the front door, and the blood on at least one of the 2 towels that contained type O-M blood.
Right.
The rope between Tate and Sebring was touched by bloody hands. The front door jamb and the short wall that separate the living room from the foyer contained baseboard high stains that were likely to have been transferred by the right leg of bloody pants. There are 2 blood samples that are somewhat key. As you exit the house using the 48-inch front door, there's a pool of blood on the right side of the threshold that is roughly 18 inches by 6 inches. In the front of the threshold, there's a doormat on the front porch that's roughly 30 inches by 18 inches.
Right.
Beyond this doormat, on an angle, is a blood spatter pattern that is roughly 18 inches by 6 inches. There are also many blood spots in many places on the porch, but no samples are taken for these spots. Now, there are 4 main explanations for the blood spatter pattern. Number 1, it's Tate's blood because she was stabbed on the front porch. Number 2, it's Tate's blood that was completely transferred by the killers. Number 3, most of the blood spatter pattern is Frykowski's blood, but the sample was taken from a large drop that occurred while either Atkins or Watson was leaving the house. Number 4, the blood spatter pattern was mistyped and it's Frykowski's. There are 2 main explanations for the blood on the front door threshold. Number 1, it's Tate's blood because she was stabbed on the front porch. Number 2, it's Tate's blood transferred by Watson. Tate was not stabbed on the front porch when the killers arrived. What could have happened was this. Atkins mentions being on the living room floor as Watson is fighting with Frykowski, Krinwinkle is fighting with Folger, and Tate is tied up. Atkins mentions that Tate's get loose and that Atkins plays Tate in a neck hold and leads Tate to the house. Atkins did not see Tate get loose right away. Tate, knowing that both Frykowski and Folger are bleeding, picks up a towel and heads for the front door. Watson sees Tate on the front porch and stabs Tate high on the right side of her abdomen. Tate returns to the living room, but does not leave a blood path because she has a towel. This is one explanation of why there are 2 towels with Tate's blood. But the combination of Watson and Atkins may be responsible for all of the blood. Atkins held Tate as Watson stabbed Tate in the heart, and then Atkins was told to go outside. Some of Tate's blood may have gotten on Atkins, and it most definitely got on Watson. Tate had 5 stab wounds to her front, 3 fatal stab wounds below the left breast, 1 fatal stab wound above the left front breast near the armpit, and 1 fatal stab wound on the right side of her abdomen. From these wounds, blood would have ran down Tate's legs, onto Watson's clothes, and onto the carpet. Watson placed Tate face down on the carpet and stabbed Tate 8 additional times in the back. Watson rolled the now blood-covered Tate on her side and pulled the rope, resulting in abrasions to Tate's left cheek. Watson picks up a towel and then walks to the front door as he dries his hands. His leg transfers blood to the short wall that separates the living room from the foyer as he passes it. Watson tosses the towel east towards the front of the living room between the trunks and the writing desk. Watson's leg transfers blood to the front door jamb as he leans against it. Blood drips from Watson's shirt to the threshold, and he wrings his shirt, increasing the size of the pool. Watson sends Atkins back into the house to write something. Atkins picks up a towel and dips it in Tate's blood. Using the towel, Atkins writes the word pig on the front door. Atkins walks back into the living room and tosses the towel west between the couch and the fireplace. Atkins then walks to the front door, and the front of her right foot steps on the bloody threshold. Atkins then walks across the porch towards the front walkway, transferring the footprint to the edge of the porch near the step to the walkway. When Frykowski went out the front door, he was bleeding a lot. He had multiple stab wounds. His head was hammered with Watson's revolver multiple times, and he was shot twice. There was much blood on the porch, and only 4 or 5 samples were typed. It's possible the blood spatter pattern on the front porch is mostly or totally Frykowski's blood. If the single blood sample that Granado lifted from the blood spatter pattern was a drop of Tate's blood transferred by Watson or Atkins, then Frykowski's blood was missed. If both Frykowski's ABO blood type and subtype were mistyped, Frykowski's blood was missed. Using the blood typing methods available in 1969, you could not say that a blood sample was definite for a certain person. You could say that a person was excluded or did not have the same blood type as a sample. You could say that a sample had a high probability of being someone's blood. If Granado had taken redundant samples for each spot where a sample was taken, and if Granado took samples of blood from the victim's clothing in the pools of blood they were lying in, then cross-checking could have been done to increase the reliability of the blood typing he did. If he did this, it's highly likely that his supervisor would have reprimanded him for wasting supplies, and Bugliosi would have mentioned this in Helter Skelter. Manson did not move Tate and Sebring's bodies. Okay, that's it.
That tab is incredible. I think you succinctly were able to state a lot of the feelings that we've had here on this program. I want to thank you for putting it in such a scholarly fashion. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What I want to talk about then is the personal and the physical now, because we're talking about the narrative that I think is more true. They entered, the people were gathered. It seems that some of the narrative in Helter Skelter seems to be fairly accurate in terms of the chronology. I always felt that Frykowski put up a huge fight, knotting up Susan's head, as she talked about in Sybil Brand, her putting the wounds in his thighs with the knife, the throwing knife from Spawn Ranch. And then ultimately, I think he was really, really hurt on the porch. I think that blood in the bushes, I think the blood on the porch, it looks like an incredible amount of blood. Just the exsanguination, the way it had to have happened, you know, the pumping of blood forcefully, the severing of these arteries. Do you agree that it was probably Frykowski who got hurt on the porch?
I think that he was hurt before going to the porch,
Right.
but he was hurt badly on the porch. Now,
yes.
There's one of the samples which there was, or I should say, one of the spots which there was no sample taken of was located near the post at the front of the porch.
Right.
And it looks like a boot. And I describe it more as the boot of Italy. If you're familiar with the geography of Italy, it looks like a boot. And then above the toe, there are like a couple of islands over there, and one of them is Corsica. And the little spot that I would call Corsica, which I think was about the size of a cantaloupe.
Okay.
That is where Granado took a sample from. Where the boot was, and I don't think the boot was much larger than a large boot. It might have been a couple of feet at most, at most, I'm saying, but it did have a good amount of blood in it. That would have been key to taking a sample from.
Exactly, because the photograph there is, that's the problem with me.
To the left of these spots, is a spot that is more rectangular in shape. It's a inches by 2 feet by
Okay.
24 inches.
Right. We can
But
see
it has a couple of rubs on it. And I believe that all of these were transferred by Frykowski, and that he may have been tackled on the front porch.
into those bushes in
what
that
happened
corner.
was,
Right. That's exactly.
in the corner, I think Watson gave some of the more stabs that
That's
were
what I feel
more
too. I think the
important that
bayonet,
caused him to bleed.
I think that was the, like, because if you fought somebody like that and you've been in a really desperate situation, hey man, the lawn is wide open, the house is wide open. What were you going to do? Get him on that half wall at the foyer? No, they got him right in the corner on the porch because he was already injured. Like you say, his legs were compromised. You think about, he's struggling when you get stabbed and your muscles are taut. His legs were killing him. He'd never been through anything like that. So then when she called for help, Tex piled into him, I would think, and just immediately went off and started stabbing him, had him in that corner on the bushes, and just went to goddamn town on him. No, I think we're in complete agreement there.
Yeah. What I believe happened, though, is when he went down near the bushes.
Yes.
That would have been when Susan called for him to come help Kringwinkle.
Right.
And what happened was Watson left the front porch, and he went in and he stabbed Kringwinkle.
Because she was making the most noise and was the most active threat. Right.
Yeah, I think I said Kringwinkle. He went over and he stabbed Folger.
Yeah, Folger. She was loud and like Casey was saying last week.
Yeah, so what then happened was, at least this is what I believe,
okay,
is that even though Frykowski was starting to get to the very dangerous zone of basically a person has 5+ liters of blood if they're a male, and he probably was close to losing a couple of liters.
Yes,
but he still had enough to get up. Now, if you look on the front walk, there is one spot that is shown on the front walk, and it looks like a Valentine or a Cupid's heart.
Right.
Although where the point of it is, and I believe that was where Frykowski fell on his ass. He got up and was trying to walk down the steps, and he fell on his ass, and I think that's an ass transfer.
I think I agree with you.
He was bleeding so much.
Yep.
And then what happened was he had just a little bit, and for whatever reason, he got up and was either tackled by Watson, who came back out, or he got onto the lawn and was starting to move. Now, it could have been because he saw Folger, although I don't know. At that point, he was probably in tough shape, and he would have just been moving for the sake of moving.
Right.
But the scarf, which I don't know if the scarf is a scarf. In Poland, there was a kind of a costume that was worn where you wore like a scarf around your waist. Like you had this belt, it was an outer belt that you would wrap around your waist. And Frykowski was dressed a little unusual. He was dressed in like Indian mod type clothes at that time. And I think that scarf was on Frykowski. I don't necessarily think it was around his neck. It might have been around his waist, but that scarf got lost about 10 feet away from the walkway. And then Frykowski was found some feet beyond there. So Frykowski ran through hell. And one of the things that Casey was saying, which I think that I would disagree with based upon knowing people of the time and so forth, is Frykowski was a rugged man. He was not a thin person or whatever. Willie Mays, the baseball star, was right about the same size as Frykowski.
Yeah.
Now, Mays was in tremendous
We may
shape,
have
but
some of those details incorrect. I was kind of surprised too with some of those details.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
sent me a nice rebuttal detailing some of those things. And when he was telling me that Abigail was the heftiest person on scene, I found that that was news to me. So I'm glad that we're getting that straightened out. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Abigail Folger was not hefty. I mean, she was a pretty decent looking woman. She didn't have she was not in the same league as Sharon Tate, but
Sure.
I don't think too many people were. But she had a very decent build. She was almost 5'5". She was a little bit less than 5'5", and she weighed about 125 pounds.
Very average build, yeah.
If you've seen the picture of her on the table at the morgue, you'll see that she had a nice balanced body. I mean, you can basically see everything. And and what's interesting about that is if you look at the autopsy report that was made of her, they mentioned to her right breast that there was only one stab wound. And when anybody looks at it, anybody whatsoever looks, you can see that there are 4 stab wounds to the right breast. And they later made an addendum to it when they talked at the trial. But Folger was a decent build. I think what she had was she may have had 5 pounds or so on Krenwinkel. And she also had the desire to live. And Krenwinkel at the time, I don't think she exactly knew what the hell she was supposed to be doing. And when you start fighting, it had to have been interesting watching a couple of girls fight. And
to the death. To the death, man. Like, what the hell? I've never heard of a woman, honestly, in my life, coming to a woman she doesn't know with a knife and just like, I'm going to kill you. And seeing the other person's response, like you say, that must have just been an incredible thing to witness. And these crimes were so horrific. When you talk about the morgue photos, looking at that couple, especially Frykowski and Folger, man, it is really hard to take what you wrote in. It's so succinct. It's so, you don't need to put anything on this crime scene to make it horrific or interesting. It just gutted me reading these details. It really hurt. How do you get through some of these things? Because it's what you wrote was incredible.
I'm not sure what you mean. How do I get through them?
Well, do you think about this as you're writing it? Like, do you physically play the thing out and you see the things? And
okay, yeah.
Because I react to it when I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, geez, it's a lot to take in.
When I know a particular subject well, which I have gone over this many times, and the way in which I go over it many times is I at times will go walk for an hour and a half. And when you walk for an hour and a half, other than walking and make sure you don't fall down or get hit by a car, you have a bit of time to actually think about things.
Yeah, I do the same.
Now, as far as what went on in that particular house, I have read, the variations of the stories, and I give priority to Atkins in that Atkins' story. Well, we really only have Atkins and Watson for what went on inside the house and so forth. And as far as Watson is concerned, we don't know that came from his tapes. And if you read his book, which is essential reading and it's free, so, go online and read his book, just as you read Paul Watkins' book, which there are free copies out there. Watson does say things in his 2 helter-skelter he calls two chapters, Helter Skelter 1 and 2, where 1 is Tate and 2 is La Bianca. He mentions things in those that he couldn't have known when he was giving his tape, he talking on tape to his lawyer, because they came out later.
That's
so
essential.
You can't, yeah. So because there was a co-writer, the guy who really did the writing, that guy would have had available lots of things. He would have had Susan Atkins, 2 Nights of Murders. He may have had the Caballero and Caruso interview. He probably had the grand jury. He probably had testimony from the first trial and from the second trial, which was Watson. So you've got all of these testimonies. And, he went and he strung them together. So I tend to give more credence to Atkins, but you have to read and you have to think about what Atkins is saying.
And her motivations, right.
I think that Atkins was in what I would call, I just lost my word here. What do you call concussion protocol?
Yeah.
When Atkins was fighting with Frykowski, I think that Frykowski belted her in the head.
I think he did too. She talked about that in Sybil Brand. Her hair was, he was pulling her hair and punching her.
But then I believe that when Watson came over to help, because Atkins was like holding on to Frykowski as Frykowski's trying to go towards the front porch. He's still in the living room.
Right.
And what Watson does add in his book is he couldn't shoot him at that time because he thought he would shoot Atkins. And so he went over and he started to stab and cut and hit on the head.
I thought the gun was broken at that point is why he did that. Thanks for clarifying that.
No, he hadn't, because he hadn't shot him yet.
Right.
Because what he did was he did a couple of hits in the house and then he shot him. And then when he later on got onto the lawn, he went nuts and he ended up repeatedly hitting him and so forth. But I think that Atkins could have also been tackled by Watson, who was going after Frykowski, and she banged her head. And when she mentions, I was on the floor, and then I'm still on the floor, and I'm on the floor, and she's mentioning these things going by, and it's like, well, why are you on the floor? And I think that she was at least stunned, if it wasn't more than stunned, because she had been through some physicalness.
Goodness. Thank you for that point. Thank you for that point, because we're trying to get to these type of things where we think about people's individual motives and their actual physical states and states of mind. I think that's incredibly important. Now, can we invite you back again very soon when we've got Casey back? Because I want to visit Susan again with you next time. I'm going to put a pin in this conversation and invite you back. I want to talk about concussion protocol. I want to talk about Susan's actions in that night in an isolated vein. So if I could ask you, between the next time we speak and today, if we could get that together, and then I'll get Casey back here on set, we'll revisit that, because he is a huge expert on Susan Atkins. I'm learning more about her and having a greater appreciation for her nuances